So in this bonus video, we're going to talk about discourse analysis and what that might look like for a student in a similar position to yours. So in this case, we're going to have an imaginary student who we'll call Susan. And she's noticed that the style of writing required in her STEM classes, that her science and math and engineering and whatever technology classes, seems to be very different from the style that is required in her humanities classes, that is her English and history and art type classes. So when she starts looking into this, she finds that her friends kind of have had the same experience. And so she thinks she's onto something. So she decides she wants to know exactly how do those styles differ. So she develops her research question first and foremost, of course. And her research question is, what are the features that mark the differences between classroom writing in STEM classes and classroom writing in humanities, such as art, history, and English? And she decides that to figure this out, the best way would be to look at the papers themselves, but to make sure that she knows that she's looking at excellent papers. So she goes to her friends and she says, can you give me any papers that got a B or above, but don't tell me what the grade is, and make sure you give me a copy that doesn't have the instructor's comments on it, because remember that your grades and your feedback from the instructor, those are actually protected by federal law as private information. And of course, there are cases where researchers can access that and use it, but those cases have to use a lot of ethical considerations and be approved by the IRB and so on. So we're going to avoid that for now and just focus on just to note the self-identification of the subjects, that this is an excellent paper by their own experience. And then she goes and she collects, and she gets 6 papers from STEM field and 5 papers from humanities. We're just making this up, so the data may be too perfect. So then she decides on a set of variables that she wants to measure. One thing she's curious is, how often do papers use, say, MLA versus APA or Chicago or whatever? So she measures that and she can put that into her spreadsheet. And then she decides, okay, I've been told don't use first person, but then my composition teacher in college was like, no, it's okay. I'm really confused by this. So let's see if they use first person. So that's something she can usually measure. She can just highlight every time there's an I or a me or a we or any of that. She decides she wants to see what the proportion of jargon is. So she, that is the technical terms that would only be understood by those within the field. And so she can highlight those in a different color very easily and count how many of those appear per paragraph or something like that. She decides she wants to look at length. Are papers in one field longer than papers in another field? Well, she can do that pretty easily. If she gets digital copies, she can literally just click on word count and get how many words there are. And she can measure length in different ways. So she could measure length overall and say, okay, it's this many pages double spaced, or it's this many words. But she can also measure average number of words per paragraph. She can count up how many paragraphs there are and how many words are in each document, and then divide the number of words in the document by the number of paragraphs, something like that. And she decides she wants to know how many sources are used in each paper. So maybe there's a difference in how much research is acceptable. So she marks each paper the ways that we talked about, and she puts all that into a spreadsheet, into a table, so that she can easily access that information. And then she is able to find out things like maybe MLA is used in half of the humanities papers, but none of the STEM papers. She finds out that the humanities papers are longer than the STEM papers, but the STEM papers have more words per paragraph. She finds out that first-person pronouns are used in half of her humanities papers, but none of the STEM papers. So now she's actually getting information that says, yes, there is a distinct difference in style. Now, keep in mind, I just made that up based on experience, so I haven't actually done that research, but that's an example of what she might encounter. And she can describe this style now in quantitative ways, that is, using numbers and concrete descriptions, not just her own analysis of what might be happening, but now she has objective data that she can point to these numbers and say, look, that's, it's this percentage. And when she goes to write her paper, she can even make recommendations based on that. So maybe she says, well, maybe our composition courses in college need to account more for this difference in style, or something like that, whatever it is that she winds up finding. So that's how you might do a discourse analysis. You could also do what's called a critical discourse analysis, where you're looking at the values expressed within the little d discourse that you're looking at, and that can point to big D discourse values. So for instance, if I were going to analyze humanities papers, and I want to know if there's a valuing of a specific dialect, for instance, because I might be concerned about linguistic discrimination or something like that. And I find that the dialect that's being prescribed in these papers and expressed in these papers, maybe that's a gatekeeper effect. Maybe some people are not being able to access research as well because they speak a dialect other than standard edited English, which, by the way, no one actually speaks natively. But by using standard editing English, which is most similar to, say, white middle class Midwestern English, are we expressing a certain value? And so you can use these methods where you count up features and you code, is what it's called in discourse analysis, for those features to kind of get a clear view of values being expressed. For instance, in my dissertation, I used this method. I used it on a huge corpus of material that took a year to collect and 2 years to process. But what I was looking at is what makes fantasy genre. And surprisingly, one of the things I found is that the most commonly expressed, this is what I look for in good fantasy, among the fans was research and believability, which are not things that we normally associate with fantasy, but those were ultimately what they really were looking for. So I had hard data to point to. So that's what discourse analysis does for us, is it converts this qualitative data of, I've got these stretches of people talking and what am I going to do with this, into quantitative data of, well, I can measure it in these ways, and I can actually put that into a spreadsheet and run different queries and algorithms. And so it's very appealing, especially if you're someone who finds that, like, literary analysis is too wishy-washy for you. Discourse analysis is right on the nose. So that's one option you can use.